I'm always telling you guys not to worry too much about your French pronunciation and accent and just to make yourselves understood. Vous faire comprendre. Now, I know that my French pronunciation is pretty good, but there is certainly room for improvement. The question is, how important is it in the grand scheme of things? And does it matter if I don't sound native? So in this video, I'm publicly submitting myself to a pronunciation assessment by Jean-Baptiste, or JB, from the channel Expat Lang, or Lang. Bienvenue JB.
Bonjour Alex, merci beaucoup de me recevoir sur ta chaîne.
Would you like to briefly introduce yourself and tell us how the assessment is going to work? I admit I'm a little nerveux.
Don't be, I can guarantee it's gonna be just fine. So hi everyone, my name is Jean-Baptiste, I'm a French teacher. I've been working as a French teacher for more than 10 years, and today I'll be analyzing Alex's pronunciation. And spoiler alert, I can already tell you that it's really good.
Since JB is a specialist in pronunciation for fast everyday French, I asked him to evaluate my French pronunciation from my previous video where I chat with my friend Damien. Now guys, this is one part of a 2-video collaboration. In a second video on JB's channel, we discuss some funny and embarrassing mispronunciations you and I both make or have made as non-native French speakers. So go and check that out after this video. Du coup,
si vous êtes prêts,
allez, c'est parti. Merci à mon invité Damien qui est ici aujourd'hui pour nous raconter un peu de son parcours en anglais. Donc commençons par une petite présentation de toi.
Okay, so we'll pause here for a second, and the first question I'd like to ask you is, what do you think about your pronunciation in this video?
Well, we're always our own harshest critics, so I would say I've never really had a problem with my own pronunciation. Thankfully, it doesn't bug me too much. I'm pretty happy with it.
And you can be, because your pronunciation is really good. This is really something you should be proud of. The first thing I'd like to mention about your pronunciation is the smoothness. I don't know if you've noticed, but the way you speak in this video is actually very smooth. There is no pause between the words. We can see that you master the words. You know exactly what words to use in what context. The grammar is also very good, and you don't pause between words to think about what you want to say, or if you do so, it sounds natural.
Merci à mon invité Damien qui est ici aujourd'hui pour nous raconter un peu de son parcours en anglais.
When we first start learning a language, the most difficult aspect is to find the right pace to say the words. And oftentimes we can find a situation in which we have to stop between two words, and we have this sound that appears in the middle. So for example, if you say je m'appelle Alexandre, je m'appelle Alexandre, you have the sound before Alexandre. But in French, words flow one into the other, and you shouldn't find this sound in the middle of a sentence. So instead of saying je m'appelle Alexandre, you should say je m'appelle Alexandre, Pelle Alexandre. You hear there is no pause in between. So that's it. Generally speaking, in French, there is no pause within a sentence unless there is a comma or a full stop. So once again, here, this is something you don't do. All the words you pronounce flow into the other. It really sounds native-like. So congratulations on this.
I think that comes from so much repetition of that fixed phrase, and that's why I think it's really important to practice new vocabulary as part of a whole block, a whole chunk, because then you develop the intonation and the natural flow of that word that you're trying to learn in a natural context. And so that would lead to fewer of those uncomfortable, unnatural pauses.
Exactly. And now there is a second idea I'd like to insist on about your pronunciation, the way you speak French, is communication. And I think that's the most important aspect when speaking a language. Communication. Pronunciation is actually quite important. People tend to be very proud when their pronunciation is as accurate as possible, but the real purpose of learning a language is being able to communicate with other people. Is this something that you insist on when you coach your students?
It's something that they know, but it's often something we need to reinforce and reassure them of, because it's not as simple as just having the sentence in your head and being able to act on it and believe it. People have their own opinions of how they sound, which may not actually be accurate. We'll have to keep saying it because people need to hear it.
I would like to mention something that we had during one of the discussions we had when we were preparing this video. You actually told me that you felt quite disappointed because you were speaking too slowly in this video. There is something I would like to say about it, is that speaking slowly is not really a problem per se when you speak a language, when you speak another language, a foreign language. In fact, speaking very slowly allows you to put the right word into the right place in your sentence and keep the flowing pace that we are looking for when we want to speak a language fluently. So by speaking slowly, you actually take the time to think about the next word and have it right on time in the flow to express yourself. Shall we move on to the next excerpt?
D'accord, très intriguant. Quel était ton niveau d'anglais quand tu as débarqué au Royaume-Uni, quand tu es arrivé là-bas? Est-ce que tu peux nous parler de ça en termes de tes connaissances dans la langue aussi, ainsi que ta maîtrise de l'oral?
In this excerpt, there is something I've noticed, and that shows that you've been living in France for a long time. That's your pronunciation of the final E at the end of the words. You know that generally speaking in French, the final E is silent. You don't pronounce the final E of a word. However, a lot of French people do it anyway in certain cases. And I've noticed that you do that. So for example, in this excerpt, you said la maîtrise.
Ainsi que ta maîtrise de l'oral.
Maîtrise, with the sound in the end. So, I mean, that's impressive to see that you've mastered this pronunciation detail of the French pronunciation. It shows that you've been living among French people for a long time, you've heard what they said, and you could actually copy them. And I'm pretty sure that you've noticed that we do have some E's pronounced in some French words, although they're not necessary.
Don't talk to me about final letters that we do or don't pronounce, you know, it's a minefield.
That's correct. It's not always easy to know what letters are pronounced.
And it's a good, thank you very much. And it's a good tip for those watching us. If you need time to think about what you want to say, which is often the case when you're learning to speak the language, you know, add on any sounds you can to give yourself an extra couple of seconds, you know, for sure. Even if it's an which isn't everyone's cup of tea, it's still very French, and a lot of us want to sound natural, so that's a good thing to adopt.
Exactly, and also that brings me back to what we were saying at the beginning about the fact that words in French flow one into the other, and having this little in the middle of the words allows us not to break this flow. So we would never have a sound in the middle of a sentence if we use this sound.
Cool, okay. What's next?
What's next? Nasal sounds. I've noticed in your videos that you do pronounce these nasal sounds, these nasal vowels very well, and it's not actually that easy to pronounce. A lot of students can't distinguish between these sounds, and let me remind the three nasal sounds that we have: en, we generally distinguish the three sounds, but in other regions of France we can have more varieties of nasal sounds, up to 6 if I'm not mistaken. So let me repeat that: en, un. And the reason why these vowels are called nasal vowels is because they are partially pronounced through the nose. So generally speaking, when we pronounce a vowel, the flow of air comes from your throat and comes out through your mouth. But for these nasal sounds, part of the air comes through your mouth and the other part through the nose. So that's why they're called nasal sounds. Practice every day, regularly, and step by step, you will find your way out of this pronunciation problem that are nasal sounds in French. But as we say, practice makes perfect. Or in French we'd say, c'est en forgeant qu'on devient forgeron.
I prefer to say practice makes progress, but I see your point. I like to get away completely from using perfect in any way. It's made me able to enjoy the language, the process of it much more once I accepted that I would not be perfect because it doesn't exist. C'est en forgeant qu'on devient forgeur.
Forgeron.
Forgeron, okay. Forgeron. Ah, that's a difficult sound, that on. Yeah, and if I said that quickly, it probably wouldn't come out as well. Forgeron, forgeron. Oh, and now I'm thinking about it. Ensuite, quel est l'extrait suivant?
So in the next excerpt, we'll be talking about puffed consonants. Listen to the following part of your video.
Ouais, c'est fascinant et très impressionnant en fait que tu sois accepté à un premier boulot vu ton niveau.
So in this last bit, c'est ton avis de ton niveau. The pronunciation of this word ton reflects a major difference between the pronunciation of English consonants and French consonants. Not all English consonants, but certain English consonants. For example, the letter T in English is very often pronounced as a puffed consonant. That is to say, there is a sound right after the T sound. A good example of this is when you say take it or leave it. Take it, take it. Okay? While in French, we don't have this puffed sound. We would say, if you pronounce the same phrase with the French pronunciation, I would say take it or leave it, take it, compared to English, take it, take it.
Okay, what's the example in this extract of where I could have puffed?
So, for example, c'est ton avis de ton niveau. Ton avis de ton niveau. Now, I'm going to pronounce this with a puffed consonant. C'est ton avis de ton niveau. And you can already hear that it sounds more English. C'est ton avis de ton niveau. While in French, we would say c'est ton avis de ton niveau. That really makes a difference.
Premier boulot, vu ton niveau.
I would like to focus on the pronunciation of stressed syllables in French. So listen to this extract and focus on your pronunciation of the word oral in French.
Est-ce que tu peux nous parler de ça en termes de tes connaissances dans la langue, aussi et ainsi que ta maîtrise de l'oral?
So the reason I wanted to talk about stressed syllables is that in English, every word has a stressed syllable. For example, you could say family, family, family. The first syllable has it's a stronger pronunciation than the other syllables. But in French, we don't really have that concept. It does exist, but it's not on every single word. You have to imagine that a French sentence has the shape of a snake that can either have its head up or its head down. So it's mainly flat, and then we have just a little stress at the end, upwards or downwards. So let me give you an example. Ce chocolat est délicieux. Na 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 na. Okay? So here, if we stressed the last syllable of every word, we would say ce chocolat est délicieux. Okay? But that's not really what's happening. Ce chocolat est délicieux. Ce chocolat est délicieux. So we hear the snake, and the snake has its head down. Let me take another example now. Est-ce que tu penses que c'est vrai? Est-ce que tu penses que c'est vrai? And then we have this upward pronunciation, so the snake has the head up. Est-ce que tu penses que c'est vrai? There can also be loops in the snake. So one word that we think is more important in the sentence can be stressed a little more than the others. Generally speaking, you stress the word of a sentence that best represents your idea. So for example, you could say je déteste le chocolat, mais j'adore la vanille. Okay? So you see, here we would only have a stressed syllable on the important word in addition to the final stress of the sentence. So now, if we come back to the excerpt I showed you, how did you pronounce the word oral in French? Or as I would say, oral.
L'oral.
That's right, oral, oral. Well, we would say oral, oral, with the stress on the last syllable.
Oral, okay.
And now pay attention to your pronunciation of the word impressionnant in the second excerpt of the video.
Très impressionnant, en fait.
So how did you pronounce the word impressionnant? Impressionnant, impressionnant. So here again, I guess this is the influence of English. How would you say impressionnant in English?
Impressive.
Impressive, impressive, impressive.
Impressive, yeah, it's that second syllable, yeah.
Exactly. So you see in French, we generally put the stressed syllable on the last syllable. So we would say oral, impressionnant. Oral, impressionnant.
Very, very fascinating. Yeah. And the thing is, I know that, and I'm rewatching that clip, the réplique, that line in the clip that you showed, and I'm thinking, why did I say that? And I think it's probably because I was improvising at the time and trying to string the words together. It wasn't scripted, and it wasn't something I had planned to say in exactly that way. And so some English starts to creep in. It still happens, but yeah, it's great to have it pointed out.
Shall we move on to the next point?
Salut tout le monde, j'espère que vous allez bien. I think I know what you're going to say.
What am I going to talk about?
I think you're going to talk about my pronunciation of monde.
Yes, Alex, you're right. That's the pronunciation of the word monde. So what do you think the problem is?
So I said, I believe if I can replicate it, monde. Monde. And it should be on, like monde.
Exactly.
Monde. So that my mouth should be much more closed. And when I think about it, it's more of a small circle of air that can come out of my mouth. And whereas when I say monde, it's more open, monde.
Exactly, exactly. Alex, do you know the three basic positions of the mouth to pronounce French vowels?
No, enlighten us.
So in French, vowels are pronounced with three basic positions of the mouth that represent the three things that French people like the most. The first thing is eating. French people love their food, so the first position of the mouth is ah. You open your mouth wide as if you wanted to eat an apple. Ah. The second position reflects the fact that we are very funny. I know that not everybody thinks that we're funny, but I really know French people are very funny and we like to have a good laugh. So the second position is smiling, a big smile. And that's what we use, for example, to pronounce the letter E, or E. And finally, the last part is that fact that we are romantic people. French people are known around the world for being romantic and taking people to Paris with a bouquet of flowers. And the last thing is kissing. The last position is kissing. That's so you bring your lips forward. And actually that's one of the stereotypes of foreign people when they imitate French people. It's always with the lips forward like this.
I think immediately of this internet meme that I've seen of the cat trying to pronounce O, the O, and it's just this very strained face. It's very funny. I'll put it on screen.
So when you pronounce the sound that's really just your lips forward, as if you wanted to kiss someone. And a good way to remember that is, for example, to take mon chéri, mon amour. And this is yours, you love it, and if you want to show that it's yours, you kiss it because you really love it, so you say mon chéri, mon amour. So that's a good way to remember that.
Very, very good way of explaining it, and I'm sure people are going to be visualizing their partner or their crush when they're next trying to say mon or ton. It's very, very good. Or monde, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's worth saying as well that although like I am aware of it, like I've said, and I've tried to remind myself to work on it, I think the main reason why I haven't fully tackled it is because it's never been a problem. No one's ever laughed at me, no one's ever corrected me, which you can see as a good or a bad thing. But the thing is, it's never impacted my life here and how I see myself, my self-esteem, my confidence in my French. So on that, so I think you'd agree that it's far from the worst mistake I could make.
Exactly, it's really not a mistake. You mentioned the fact that people have never corrected you, but my question is, corrected compared to what? What is exactly a correct pronunciation of French? I think that the question of pronunciation is more related to the way we teach French. So this is the way teachers and book creators have decided that French should be taught and pronounced. So this question of correct pronunciation is actually relevant only in the context of a French lesson, because actually people who have learned French on the streets with people, with the native, not really going to a specific school, don't really ask themselves these questions of correct or incorrect. They just copy the people they're around. And that's actually what you do when you speak a language. You generally speak the language of your community, of your group, of belonging. So when you live in another country, you tend to copy the people you hang out with most of the time.
Yeah, and I think we as students should take that and really think about that and think, oh, so, you know, if I speak French fluently but with some pronunciation oddities, does that mean I'm speaking incorrect French, you know? There are plenty of natives who, from small areas, which I think you've told me about before, like off camera, who pronounce things very differently to the majority. So they sound strange to someone else from the same country, but they'd still be considered a native speaker. So, you know, again, I find it fascinating to think about what is correct and what is incorrect.
Is it okay if we move on to the next part? And for this next excerpt, I'd like you to focus on your pronunciation of the word peut-être.
Mais Damien, il a raison. Si c'est un stage, il y a moins de risques, peut-être, pour l'entreprise.
How did you pronounce it?
This is intriguing because I think I say it perfectly.
Very small detail. In fact, in French, we have two different sounds. The first one is as in je, te, me, le. All these short words that have this sound is this, And we have another sound which is with the rounded lips. Okay, so this is the one we should hear in the word peut-être, peut-être. We don't say peut-être, we say peut-être with the rounded lips.
Peut-être, peut-être, peut-être,
Perfect.
peut-être. I feel my bottom lip pushing out as I try to exaggerate it to make it clearer. Peut-être, peut-être.
That's exactly it.
Okay, wonderful. I had never even noticed that, so thank you very much.
You're most welcome. As we mentioned earlier, really communication is the key. That's the most important aspect. So pronunciation is not that big a deal. So that's about it. And you see, I mentioned very small details, and they're not even the most important aspects of your pronunciation, but I have to admit that all in all, your pronunciation is absolutely amazing. I kind of like to repeat that.
Thank you so much, and I just hope that for everyone watching, they've picked up some good tips that they can apply to their own pronunciation. And very important for me to do this video with you and show people that my pronunciation, even if they might hear it as perfect, it's not the case, but I can still pass for that in your ears because of all the other elements put together for my French. And I want you guys to see that pronunciation is just a part of it. If you can be understood, that's the first goal, and after that, improve it to your heart's content, however much it's important to you, but make sure that communication is your first objective. Okay, so thank you so much once again, JB, for agreeing to do this video and coming on. I had a lot of fun, honestly, very fascinating. Where can people find you, and what should they do if they want to work with you or see more of your stuff? Where should they go?
So if people want to find out more about what I do, well, obviously there's my YouTube channel, but on my YouTube channel it's mainly about grammar and how to correct sentences. But the core of my work is in my podcast. So I have a podcast on Spotify, on iTunes, in which I let people listen to native level conversations. So we speak French. I speak French in these episodes the same way I would with my friends. That is to say, at a fast pace, dropping a lot of syllables and using a lot of vocabulary that's not always taught in schools. And if you listen to these podcasts, you will notice how different spoken French can be from standard French that is taught in schools. And in addition to this, on my website, I offer tons of resources for people to actually master these differences. So for example, I have this spoken French transcript with which you can see the standard French version of the conversation, and on the other side, all the differences in pronunciation and grammar that makes it so special. So people are very often puzzled when they listen to movies or series or listen to native conversations and realize that it's very different from what they've been learning. But actually it's really another language. So this is what I give access to on my website. And I've also recently launched a book that is available on Amazon and that gives both aspects of French. So there are articles in standard French and at the same time, conversations in spoken French. And the book focuses on some of these differences. So the first book is about the way French people eat on a daily basis and how they choose their food. It's, I would say, intermediate or advanced level book. So if you're interested, well, you can find it on Amazon. The name is Expat Lang, Understand French as Really Spoken in France.
Perfect. I have seen a little extract of your book and your method that is used in the book, and it was very impressive and immediately understandable for me. So go and check out everything that JB just mentioned. I'll put links to everything down in the description of the video. And do remember, guys, that this is just one half of 2 videos that we've done. The other one is over on JB's channel for you to watch right now. Also, a link to that is down in the description and over here next to us somewhere on the screen. But thank you so much for watching. Merci à toi, JB.
Merci à toi pour l'invitation.
Et à la prochaine, tout le monde.
À très bientôt, au revoir.
Ciao.